to Death and Aliens, an in-depth look at horror and sci-fi TV from two friends who vaguely know what they're doing. I'm MK.
And I'm Courtney.
And Courtney, how are you?
I am well. I have had a Pop Tart now, so I'm feeling on top of the world. I'm on my
Yeah.
second cup of coffee. Um, Halfway through it. Things are going well.
Right?
But I had a really nice weekend too. Like I did a lot of work, which sucks. But I also had a lot of fun. We did two of my favorite things this weekend. On Saturday, we went and had sushi with Nick's mom and her best friend April. And we just, we like hanging out with them anyways. But it's the sushi place. I think it's called Yummy Tokyo. I just realized I don't know what it's called. We've been going to the same place for 8 years. So I've Nick is now texting with one of the servers, like their friends. Like it's one of those places.
Listen, we had a hibachi place here that we were so close to the owners that for Christmas he gave my parents I don't know what, and then gave me separately from my parents a bottle of wine for Christmas.
That's so cute.
Because it was a wine that I had really liked at the restaurant.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this guy's an owner. I think he's just management, but he's been there. I mean, since we've been going, they've moved locations and he has moved with them. So he's been there forever. But he's really great. And so we went and had our favorite sushi place, and they have this thing that is just like calamari snow crab or something. It's called something super generic, and it is literally a bed of snow crab with fried calamari on top and eel sauce, and it is the perfect dish.
That sounds amazing.
I always end up eating it by myself. No one else seems to want it. Rachel takes 3 bites. It's like a plate. Like it's an appetizer, and I eat it as my meal, and then I have sushi. It's always an adventure at sushi. But truly it's my favorite thing on the planet, I think. And Friday night, my other favorite thing that we did this weekend, we did an escape room. And I love an escape room.
I love it.
So we have now gone to 2 because Mike and Kirsten, who lived on the way that we do game night with a lot, they're also into escape rooms, but they've done most of them because they're those people.
Of course.
They don't listen, but I would tell them that to their face. I probably have. But so we have very limited rooms left we can do because they've done so many of them.
Yeah.
But we did one that was the very first Clue room I ever did was the Mardi Gras room at this place called Clue Carré in New Orleans. And they've redone it since then. So this was of course, 9 years ago. They've redone it now. It's now called Carnival Heist. And it was super fun. We got out super fast. We were the fastest time to get out had 37 minutes left, and we had 32 minutes left. We were super fast.
Yeah.
But it was so really fun. It was a 3-room one. So you had to you were split up. This doesn't give the room away because I get mad when you do that. But you're split up to start. And then you both have to figure out how to get out of your rooms and then reconnect in the middle to steal a crown. And it was just so much fun. We did it. I love it. So I had aside from the literal 18, 20 hours I worked over the Saturday, Sunday, I did have a really great time as well.
Nice.
So how are you? What's up?
I'm good. I am just really, I feel like I'm really just kind of getting into summer. I had so much to do with the idea of school closing and job interviews and all that stuff that I really didn't have a chance to enjoy summer. So I'm I haven't even picked up a book.
Ugh.
Which is awful.
For sure.
Summer is my reading time, and I don't even know where the book I'm reading is right now. But so I need to finish the fucking Game of Thrones book that I've been reading for 4 years.
Which one are you on?
The 5th one. I'm on the 5th one, which is the last one that is published. But I started it in 2020.
I mean, I started the first one in 2013 or something. I don't know. And I read a quarter of it.
So I have to finish that. I started this book last summer and only made it to chapter 21. So I have to finish this one.
Oh, I remember when you started that one.
Yeah. So there's that. Finish that.
Is it still good?
It is still good from what I remember from a year ago. But then I have another book that I want to read that I think it's a nonfiction book. I forgot to actually research it. My cousin posted something in her Instagram story that was a quote from the book, and I loved the quote. And it was a picture of the page of the book, and she had underlined this quote. And I was like, ooh, tell me everything. And let me see if her story might be old enough that the story.
Are you on Goodreads?
No.
Oh, you should be.
Um,
I only can keep up with people in their books when they're on Goodreads or
mm,
if they're Rachel. But that's because I
um,
have access to her library card now, so I know what she
so
reads.
her story is too old that I can't actually see the quote on
Hmm.
Instagram anymore. It's in her story, but the book is called I Like to Watch by Emily Nussbaum.
Oh,
And
I've heard of Emily Nussbaum. I think she writes
um
fiction.
it might be. But so my cousin's in film school. Um and the quote was about, oh no, it is, this one's not fiction or not nonfiction. It's
Yeah.
called I Like to Watch Arguing My Way Through the TV Revolution. And the quote was about what the pause button has done for the way we like intake television and like storytelling and like our ability to think about what we've watched and not just passively take it in. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, just that quote. I was like, I need to know everything this girl has to say.
Yeah,
And
she writes articles for the New Yorker. That's why I recognize her name.
okay. But so I really, that is the next big book I want to read.
That sounds really good. I'm gonna add it to my list. You see, I'm telling you, you got to get on this Goodreads.
My
You're
my
like
my
12 years
problem
behind,
my
but
problem about Goodreads is that I feel like I would then get overwhelmed because my list would be so long and it would be bigger than like my list is currently the pile of books that I have in my house that I haven't read. And so like
yeah.
if I start actually making a list, then I get overwhelmed.
Oh, I mean, that's fair. I have 1,791 books on my want to read list. But I've read 362 that are on here. I've read more than that, but those are the ones that are on here from when I started actively using it. But I like that they do a reading challenge and keep up, and I forget what I read a lot, which is not great but it's how
Yeah.
my brain works. So I can go back to Goodreads and see if I marked it as want to read or if I actually read it.
Okay. Yeah.
So I like, and I can, you like see what other people are reading and like message. You can like send suggestions, like send recommendations to people.
Okay.
I'm big advocate of Goodreads.
I will consider it, but again, I don't know if it will just be overwhelming for me.
Right. I don't want to add to that of your life, but it just brings me joy. You can
Well,
also
because
sign up for giveaways and they give you free books sometimes.
the other thing is all my friends will be like, "Oh, my Goodreads challenge. I'm like 8 books into the year." And I'm like, "I haven't read 8 paragraphs of a book." Like
Yeah, but
I
you'll
can't.
read like 8 books this month. Like, it's like
I
you just
know.
aren't in the same time frame as
Yeah.
everyone else. I'm that same way too. I read like 10 and then I don't read for like 2 months.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I read like 3 books this year, but it was all books that I was going to teach my kids that I had to read first.
that's fine. It counts.
And I read like textbooks.
Those, I guess, technically also count. They're boring, but they count.
The Callahan
There you
book.
go.
Implementing the cognitive academic language learning approach.
Add it to your Goodreads. And then read books that are good and add them to your Goodreads too.
Yeah. So speaking of reading and improving ourselves and learning things, what can you do to improve my life?
Stop closing the pictures that I've opened in the past when I need them. That's where we can start. No, don't quit yet. The worst moments are usually followed by the most beautiful silver linings. You have to stay strong. Remember to keep your head up and remain hopeful. And that is from Unknown.
I like it. I like it a
Thought it was
lot.
nice. Pretty uplifting, pretty good to do. I don't know what I'm saying.
It's okay. I just like hit my computer and it did something weird, but
Mm,
it is fine. So yeah, today, I don't know. Today we're talking about it's Courtney and I already briefly discussed. There's nothing really wrong with this episode. I just don't feel like I have anything I want to say about it. We're talking about Stargate SG-1 Season 6, Episode 7, called Shadow Play, which I also do not understand the title.
I don't know if it's just because of the lighting tools they used this, because they don't usually use a lot of shadowing techniques or like hiding the villain in the dark or whatever, trying to like throw you off with lighting.
There was some really interesting lighting choices in this episode.
But I mean, also like, I think like it's a shadow of yourself sometimes. So like that could also, I think there are better names.
Yeah.
But those are the reasons that I would guess that it is named that.
It was only rated 7.2 stars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Which not the lowest that we've even seen, but
yeah. And like you said, it wasn't bad. It's just like
yeah,
fine.
Exactly. It came out July 26th, 2002, which is like a week after this episode premieres on our channel. The same number one song, not same number one book, nothing has changed, but the number one movie is Austin Powers Goldmember.
What a time.
Because that is the day that
confession.
movie came out.
I've still not seen any Austin Power movies.
I've seen the first one. That's it.
And I don't know how I have it because Caitlin and Jamie used to watch them all the time and I never saw them.
Yeah, I've seen the first one. I didn't dislike it, but I watched it when I was probably too young to really get all of it. And so like I just didn't care as much. And like I get the jokes, like I know the basis. It's a parody of James Bond, and most of the most famous gags of it are pop culture knowledge anyway. So I feel like you don't have to watch it to really get it. This one,
I feel like I know what happens. I know the jokes. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember this one being a really, really big deal when it came out because it was Beyonce in the movie. And like 2002, this is when Beyonce is like just starting to do things outside of Destiny's
Creating
Child.
The Beehive.
Right. And it was a big, big deal because in having a woman of color be the quote unquote Bond girl, the fact that a parody movie did it first was like a big deal. But I also remember Goldmember not being as good as the first two. So
I just remember the hype from it. I don't know any of the reviews. I just remember the hype from when it came out.
Yeah. Speaking of hype, the only news I have today is really mostly I took two different news articles and put them together because I really could not understand how they both happened on the same day.
Great.
Because they both have to do with President Bush. Because on this day, July 26, 2002, President Bush had a press conference where he made a proclamation to honor the day because it was the 12-year anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act coming into play. And so he was making a big deal about how the ADA has changed. I didn't know that. The ADA has changed labor force legislation and all this kind of stuff. But conversely, on this day, he actually signed a bill to repeal the ability to have labor protections in wartime. So, like the executive ability to waive labor protections because of war.
He signed, and you take.
Right, and I was like, does he like not say that both of those things happen on the same day? Like wherever you stand on labor laws, because I think there's a lot of conversation to be had about whether unions are always helpful or what it is, because I think sometimes they go too far. Like my favorite thing is that Kathy Hochul just signed a bill this week that makes it impossible for schools to fire tenured teachers.
I thought that was already a thing.
Yeah, and then Governor Cuomo made a bill that made it much easier to get rid of a teacher for just cause, even if they were tenured. And Kathy Hochul said, "No, why would we do that?" I have lots of questions about teachers' unions. Despite being a teacher, I don't know that they are always protecting the kids more than they are protecting the teachers.
I was gonna say that I worry because there are really great teachers and they do really need those accomplishments, and like absolutely. If you're tenured and you don't have that stress behind you and you're a great teacher,
and like great. As someone as someone who worked at a school that got closed without cause, without any warning, and then had to pick my life up and hope that they were going to pay out my contract, I understand,
right?
But not all protections are just,
and there are abusive teachers sometimes, and those teachers can still be protected under stuff like this sometimes.
Yeah. And I think it's true in other unions as well. I think that the idea of unions and the initial protections of unions are absolutely worth it. But then you have to look into what are they actually protecting?
What exactly they do, yeah.
Yeah. And so it is a very, very gray area. I'm not saying repeal unions. I'm just saying there's some gray areas that we need to have conversations.
Facts.
But what
they do, right. Yeah.
But like him being like, woohoo, let's protect disabled people, but also we're in war, so I can force you to not have to follow labor laws. Like,
yeah.
And it was just like,
yeah. It's like yes and no. Like I don't. Now you're back on neutral ground. Like
Right. I'm like, I don't.
I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
that's the
And like,
government.
right. And I understand that like wartime, especially when you get back into like World War One and World War Two and the necessities of wartime manufacturing and blah 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 blah
Sure.
blah. But I have so many questions.
And there are things you can do where you can find exceptions or you can find like a counterbalance. If you have to do more, you can do less somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
It's just that's a bold choice.
So having those two things be the two things that came out of the
The
White
two
House
news
on the same
pieces.
day, I was
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
great. And of course, you know, we're still in 2002, so I don't see real news because
Right.
I'd have to pay for like 18 different newspaper subscriptions to find one decent headline from the 2000s, and that just feels unnecessary.
For sure, for sure, for sure.
But this episode, on the other hand, was directed by Peter DeLuise, written by Joseph Malozzi and Paul Mully, and edited by Rick Martin. So we have nothing new to talk about there. The guest star, though, I do have tons to say.
Good, because I recognize him and I don't know why.
So his name is Dean Stockwell. He will play Dr. Kieran. And he is known for Quantum Leap, the original, not the new one, Married to the Mob, and the movie Paris, Texas. His he has done almost everything. Like you've probably seen him in things. I really didn't have anything that I saw him in that was like
Dean
super specific.
Stockwell?
Yes. His father, Henry Stockwell, was the prince in Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so fun.
And
Oh,
so,
I love
but
that.
so because of that, he was a Hollywood baby in the 30s and 40s,
Mhm.
and he
What a time to
was
be a Hollywood baby.
right. He was the golden child of MGM. He was an MGM child star, so he was in lots and lots of those movies when he was really young in the time that
Mhm.
like you signed a contract with the studio, not with the movie. And then in the 60s and or late 60s, early 70s, most of the 70s actually, and the early 80s, he kind of took a hiatus from acting. He took some time off, did some family stuff, whatever.
Good for him.
But then in the early 80s, he got his real comeback. This was when he did Paris, Texas, but then he also was in the original David Lynch Dune film.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that was like his big thing. And then he got back into acting. And like I said, he's done a lot of everything. This is when he really started to do TV. So a lot of the 80s and 90s TV shows he's been in. He kind of took a hot second break from acting again in the late 80s, early 90s, when he decided to take his political activism and do something with it. And he ran for president in 1992 and lost the Democratic nomination to Bill Clinton.
Obviously.
And then in 2015, he suffered a stroke and did retire from acting altogether. But he died in 2021 at 85 years old of natural causes at his daughter's house in Australia, surrounded by his family. So
that's nice.
Yeah. But yeah, so like I said, he started as an MGM child prodigy and didn't retire from acting until 2015. So I'm sure you've seen him in things.
I actually don't know that I've seen. Oh, I may have seen him in the Twilight Zone, but that wouldn't have been like stuck out in my mind as
right.
him, But he did Murder, She Wrote, maybe.
I mean,
maybe I saw him in the 80s stuff, so his face was just like recognizable.
Yeah, like I said, he's done so many things. He was in The Secret Garden, he was in Blue Velvet, he was in Beverly Hills Cop 2.
I mean, so many things.
He was in an episode of Columbo that I really like. He was in McHale's Navy. But yeah.
Yeah, just all the things.
He's just one of those guys who's literally like my favorite is to look at just the sheer number of credits they have on IMDb. Also, he was born in 1936, so he was alive when Snow White came out, and his dad became.
That's so nice.
He has 282 credits on IMDb. 206 of them are for acting.
Mhm.
6 for directing, 2 for writing, 1 as producer, 2 on the soundtrack, and 5 as a credit for the thanks, 37 as his self, and 22 of archived footage.
Good for him.
So, and he also did some voice acting, so he's done a lot of cartoon stuff as well.
I saw that he did Batman, like
Yes.
Batman cartoons.
Yes. I want to say he did, but his first credit for acting was in 1945 when he was 9 years old. So,
Good for him.
and like he was in Abbott and Costello Go to Hollywood as a child.
Aw,
Like, yeah, like he was,
like in good stuff.
he played the boy with green hair in the 1948 movie, The Boy with Green Hair.
That's
So, yeah, so
funny.
he's like that guy.
Yeah.
Um, so this must have been a really interesting part for him to play.
Yeah. Especially like growing up in like the like real Hollywood age.
Yeah.
Like what a time.
Right. So we open this episode with a call to SGC from through the gate, and it ends up coming from Kelowna, where they would like to reinstate trade. While discussing it, Jack and Teal think it's a very dumb idea because A, they framed Daniel, and
Right.
B, they're technologically inferior and have nothing to offer us.
Right.
And Sam reminds them that just because the X302 did not work the way they wanted it to, it doesn't mean that Nequadria itself is not
Useless, yeah.
super helpful, and that this is like their best bet at creating like weapons and defense shields that would actually stop the Goa'uld. So they should probably like not write off the Kelownan people immediately. And then we get the credits. Yeah. So, I mean, I told you last week that we were going to address Jonas's inability to return home, and
Yep. And we did.
right there at the top. So, after the credits, Jonas is very stressed about this happening. He does not really want the Kelownan people to be coming there. He feels very vulnerable. And Teal'c reminds him that Teal'c basically has the exact same story. Like he abandoned people in Tulak. He made some choices, and then he had to deal with them.
I
And
love their conversations. I
Yes.
understand we're what, 7 episodes in with Jonas, but like
yeah,
I just really love the Jonas Teal'c dynamic.
because they like it's the first time that somebody actually can understand the other one.
I am a little concerned to immediately go off the rails. I'm a little concerned that it's going to take away from some of the other dynamics because now that we've lost to Daniel Jack and like we still have the Jack Sam, but it's a little more muted lately. Aside from when he was like basically dying. But
Yeah.
like Jonas and Teal'c have kind of become more of the forefront of the dynamic duos.
Right.
And so I don't want to lose the others to get theirs. I just want to have all of them, but I'm
Yeah.
concerned about that.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, we have had to focus a lot more on the season on the alien versus the non-alien.
Yeah.
So that's a fair concern. But Teal'c basically says just because you're considered a traitor doesn't stop what you did from being right.
Right.
So then the Kelownans arrive, and one of them is a professor who has worked with Jonas for the last 6 years, but they all ignore his existence. Like, General Hammond is like, here's my team. And of course, you guys know Jonas Quinn, and they all just like pretend that he's not there.
Yeah. Like, what a time.
So they go to the briefing room and they're discussing why they're there. Since things weren't exactly left in a cozy situation. And basically, Jack is like, I don't really want to give you anything because you did X, Y, and Z. Like, these are all the problems I have with you. And they're basically like, yeah, but also you're harboring a traitor. So,
Yeah.
and they're like, let's focus on the problem at hand. We're being attacked. And it turns out that the other two countries on the planet have signed a non-aggression pact that they're going to join each other to fight the Colonians, and the Colonians want weapons in exchange for the Nequadria. And if they don't get it, they're prepared to launch a Nequadria bomb that they have now successfully tested. And I really appreciated this scene because we also got a callback to the Nazi episode where they were like, listen, while we have met you and we know your people and we trust Jonas, like, we don't know every side of this war. Last time we blindly supported one side of a conflict, it turned out they were trying to commit genocide. So, like, we're not really gonna like just give
It shows they learned their
weapons,
lesson.
which is lovely. I love to see callbacks where we don't really need to know everything about the episode, and if you didn't see it, it doesn't matter. But like, if you have seen every
they know it
episode,
happened.
yeah, if you have seen every episode, you're like, oh, they are actually learning things. Just because it feels like they're making the same mistake over
Yeah.
and over and over again, it's not
Right.
quite the same
It's not
mistake.
quite the way. Yeah.
So in the other room, Sam and Jack are talking to Jonas, and they're like, what do you like? Give us your perspective on this situation. And Jonas is like, listen, like, these conflicts have gone on for centuries. Like, I don't even know who originally started it. It's petty violence and it's awful. And like, if we don't protect the Colonians, they're going to be blown off the face of the planet. Like, this is not going to be good for them. And Jack, very sternly, but not unfeelingly, reminds him that he no longer gets to protect Kelowna outright, that his priorities have changed now that he's a part of SG-1, and if they can help Kelowna, they will, but they have to look at the bigger picture. So Jack goes to see Hammond, and Hammond's like, the Joint Chiefs are meeting. I need to give them my recommendation. Like, what do you think? And Jack's like, no, because after they protect themselves, who knows what else they'll do with it. And Hammond's like, that sounds like something Daniel would say. So,
which, like, is true.
It's true. Jack is growing too, because a season and a half ago, Jack would have said, yeah, give them a fucking plane. I don't care. We need the Nequadria. Right. We need their information, their technology. Yeah. So, good for Jack. And he also says he worries that Jack's judgment is clouded because of what happened with Daniel. And Jack says it absolutely is. Like, he's not pretending that he doesn't hate these people, which, as long as we all know that that's where his thing's coming from, we can accept his opinion as what it is. However, they're interrupted by an off-world activation, and the Kelownan signal is being presented through the Stargate. So they open the iris, and Dr. Kieran comes in by himself and says he needs to speak to Jonas. So Jonas and Dr. Kieran are in his lab, and they talk about why Jonas is working for someone who won't help Kelowna. And Jonas says that, like, the planet would be better off if everyone was united and they could face other challenges as like a whole planet, because like the Goa'uld aren't a fucking joke. Right. And Dr. Kieran is like, this is amazing that you believe that. I'm part of a secret underground resistance, and that is going to try to stop the war. So Jonas fills the rest of the team in, and they decide that they need more information before they can like agree that this is something that they're going to support.
Well, because they're already part of one resistance trying to fight the Jaffa.
Right. And the Tok'ra. Yeah. So the Pentagon has cleared them to trade only non-military technology. So they go back to Kelowna for the negotiations. They're going to try to figure out this resistance thing and do their negotiations. The Kelownan government explains that they have 300 pounds of Nequadria. I don't know what that means.
I mean, I also don't know what that means, but it does feel like a lot.
But like, okay, so like, let's think about hydrogen because like this is kind of being related to like an H bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the weight of hydrogen? It is,
One.
well, it's one atomic mass unit. Um, so a hydrogen in pounds is 0.005. Oh no, that's the density. Yeah.
I'm not the one who knows how weights work for
No, I
small
don't.
objects.
1 pound of hydrogen would be 192 cubic feet. So, so 300 pounds of that would be like 6,000 feet worth of gas.
That's more than a mile.
Yeah, that's insane. So it's fucking a lot, is what it comes
Yeah.
down to. Although I have no idea what hydrogen is when no longer in gas form, but that's because I barely passed chemistry and I don't care that much. Anyway,
Yeah, chemistry was not my forte. I'm good at science, not chemistry.
yeah. Which
Or physics.
my grandpa used to own a chemical company and my dad worked there. And so when I was
Mm,
struggling in chemistry, he was like, I don't understand why this is hard for you. And I was like,
sure.
great. It really is. And I was like, so much of it has to do with like you gave me a formula and you said if I add these two chemicals and blah 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 blah, but I can't do it because it is radioactive. Like so, like that. There's nothing physical. There's nothing for me to see or touch or feel or understand. You're just
Mm-hmm.
saying words about elements that I'm not even sure are real.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so they are like, we'll give you some of it if you can help us make our jet fighters combat ready. And Sam's like, actually, we're thinking more like 15,000 units of antibiotics.
Which like also feels important. Like
It's very
antibiotics are
important. It's
good.
very important. It would be so good for them, but they like
Mhm.
are like, how will that help us win the war?
Well, if you don't die before the war starts, that helps.
Correct. Um, so negotiations are not going well.
Mhm.
And Jack asks Dr. Kieran if he could get in touch with his resistance buddies to help them figure out what to do next. So Dr. Kieran goes to the resistance camp and asks the leader to talk to SG-1 because he does trust Jonas. So he trusts
Mhm.
Jonas, so he thinks that the rest of them can be trusted too if Jonas trusts them. Um, but while this is happening, the first minister, Valis, is talking to Jonas alone. And this is the scene that is like the play of shadows itself is really,
Yeah.
really good. And he basically tells Jonas that Dr. Kieran is acting erratically. Things aren't going really well. He doesn't want Kelowna to stop existing. He doesn't want to hurt people, but
Right.
he can't do anything about it if his country doesn't exist anymore. And so
Mhm.
he said, if you can keep an eye on Dr. Kieran for me and make sure he doesn't continue to spiral, I will give you amnesty and you can come home and you can lead the project and be in charge and have everything as if you were never gone.
You know, and that's a common concept. People are like, we'll give you everything back you wanted. Like, I don't want to be a part of you anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I know you don't like me and you've already put me in this bad situation. Why would I then want to conform to whatever you've decided I'm going to do and
Yeah.
pretend like everything's better? Everything's not
Yeah.
better. I'm still mad. Maybe I hold grudges. I don't know. But I would every day be like, when's the next time they're going to kick me out?
Well, I'm like, if I fought you because I didn't agree with you anyway, what makes you think that it will be as if this never existed is the path I want?
Right. Yeah. And like a whole new group of people have accepted you for as you are and are giving you all these wonderful things, these off-world experiences.
Yeah.
Like, why would I go back to the common, the common man's lifestyle that's sciency, which is great, but
Right.
not a lot of action.
Yeah. So Jonah's supposed to talk to Dr. Kieran, and Dr. Kieran is like, I have these headaches, I'm so tired, like everything's like things are not going well. And Jonas is like, don't worry, everything's gonna be fine. Like I promise everything will be okay. Um, and he's like, I trust SG-1. We will make sure this is fine.
Yeah.
So the negotiations continue to go badly. And Jack asks Jonas how things are going with Dr. Kieran, and he's like, I haven't seen Dr. Kieran all day.
Yeah.
Which, at first glance, doesn't really mean anything because this show does a terrible job of explaining when it is a new day or not.
Well, I will say, like, even from that first moment,
Yeah.
I was like, Jonas is not a bad actor. And this is bad acting. Like,
yes.
And so I was like, something is strange here. And I was like, my first thought was that they had cloned Jonas when they brought him back. And so they were using that against, they had only brought them back to use him against Dr. Kieran and to figure out what the resistance was. That was what I had decided.
That's
and I was
totally
like, it's called polonium, which kind of sounds like clone. So
and we know how Jonas feels about cloning. We talked about it 2 weeks ago.
Right. So A plus B equals C. Like I don't know.
That's totally fair. He was very, very robotic, but I think you can almost chalk it up to like he's very uncomfortable with what he was just asked to do, and he knows everything's not going to be all right, and so he's like saying everything's all right because he doesn't know what to do, and he can start to see the erratic behavior. But then you have like, so you keep having these little things where you're like, maybe, but no. But
yeah.
And
the first time put me in question.
Yes.
The chase scene is what set me off.
Right. Well, and there's something that I do have one tiny trivia thing that when we get to the chase scene, but it's something that like it's listed as trivia as if it's supposed to be everybody would know this, but I don't think that makes sense. Okay. So like I will talk to it. But like the other thing is here is like, oh, I haven't seen him all day. And then it's like, red flag, you were literally just with him, except that what the fuck day is it? Like,
right. How do we know?
And how do we know that? That's one thing is this line was supposed to be a clue that the scene before it wasn't quite right, except that their changing of the days hasn't made any sense because like they said in the scene before, Dr. Kieran went to the resistance that they had adjourned for the day. And this is the first time that they're back in there for that day. So was everything that happened with with Ballas and him talking to Dr. Kieran the night before, or was it that morning? I don't know.
There's no way to know.
There's no way to know. So that was interesting dialogue that was executed.
It was
badly.
I did write that part off though.
Yeah.
I did completely disregard
because
like,
exactly.
Okay,
because
he didn't.
Right. Because like it's executed. It's great dialogue that's executed badly by the editing. Yeah. Which
because also like when he's talking to what is the guy's name? The head of everything?
Ballas.
Ballas. When he's talking to Ballas, things happen and then you come back and he's still talking in that same conversation of Ballas, but it feels like a day has changed and then come back to the first day. Even though I know that's not exactly what happened, but that's what it felt like in the conversation he had with him. And so yeah, it felt out of order. And so I couldn't be certain if it actually was her or if it was in my brain.
I don't know. So, and as they're fighting, the Colonians get intel that the Turanians or whatever the other people are edging toward the border, and Sam's like, okay, well, if they're here but they haven't like attacked yet, that means like we can still negotiate, we can participate. We're like, what? Let us talk to them. Like we have diplomacy teams. And they're like, well, that would require making the gate public. And they're like, well, you should just do that anyway. And they go, oh yeah, like you do on Earth.
Which is a fair burn. A fair burn.
Yeah. So then SG-1 goes to see Dr. Kieran and he is like losing it because his scientists keep getting transferred away from him and he thinks that the government is like onto him and like trying to separate him from people and like he pulled them into the resistance. So like clearly they're going to come after him
He's
next.
Yeah.
And he's like, the resistance is ready to make their move in 2 days, but the only building we can't take over is this building because it's so heavily guarded. So, like, if you help us, I will give you the stockpile of stolen Quadria I have saved for the resistance. And so Dr. Kieran goes to talk to the resistance and let them know what's happening. And he's headed to the headquarters, but he gets stopped by Jonas, who says that someone is following him. And in this time, I said Jonas in quotation marks because this time his language is so robotic that it's not even like.
So I was pretty certain he was a clone now.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Which is still not correct, but I was
still not correct. But he like
was.
seems like a robot at this point.
Yeah.
And they like go to lead him to headquarters, and then we have like a really long, like unnecessarily long, like shootout scene where things are going crazy. But the hint in this scene that things aren't right is Jonas's gun. And this is because it's a detail that they expect everyone to have seen, but the average person isn't going to notice. Jonas has not become like a full-fledged member of the team. Jack still doesn't 100% trust him, and he's still not military or really human. If you notice, Teal'c doesn't have like a military issue gun most of the time. Right. He has a Zat and his staff. He doesn't have military issue guns. Daniel almost never had anything but a handgun on him or a Zat. They're not military. They don't get military guns. Jonas, the gun that he carries with him on all of the missions previous to this are the Intar guns that the training teams used in Prodigies that shoot stuns, not bullets. Which makes sense when you look at it retroactively, but how many people who aren't fucking nerds looked at him with his never having shot the weapon so far in the show and said, oh, that's not a real gun.
So here's what I saw in that scene that told me I was correct when I was not. I thought, so they were chasing, the guy was chasing them. And when he turned around to shoot, he very clearly did not shoot at the guy. He shot at the wall. Like his aim was very off. And so that's why it felt to me like he was a clone that was on the side of Valis, because he was working with this guy to create that intensity that he needed so that Karen would lead him straight to it and be like, no, we have to go now. We have to do this because they're coming after us. And he would lead him straight to the resistance. That was what my brain said, because he clearly did not shoot at the guy. And he looked like he would have had better aim.
Because they didn't, neither of them shot, because neither of them were there. But also, if you like are paying attention to the character development, Jonas having a real gun that shoots real bullets doesn't exist. So that could not have been real. Right. But that's why I was like, that's the only piece of trivia I have for this episode, and it's stupid.
It's so detailed. But it is, I do like it.
Yeah. It is something that no one would have noticed. But during this shootout, Dr. Kieran falls off scaffolding and gets injured.
I thought he died. And I was like, what a way to go.
Right. I thought he died too.
I thought it was just like done.
Yeah. But he is in the infirmary in SGC, and he has like broken an arm or leg or something, and also like is having some consciousness and brain issues, but they can't figure out exactly what that is yet, and no one seems to know what happened. No one was there. Which is another hint that Jonas wasn't there, because why would Jonas not tell Dr. Fraser what happened if he was there?
Right.
So Jonas basically convinced everybody else to like let that his recovery would be better at SGC, that they have more medical technology. So that's how they got back there. The Colonians claim no knowledge of Dr. Kieran's accident, and SGC still doesn't want to help with the war, but Sam wants to at least try to track down the smuggled Naquadria. So
these Colonium people, they sure do like to give cop-out responses. They're like, we didn't know about that. No, Daniel did that. We didn't do that.
Yeah.
Nothing. We don't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
We're unaware of any wrongdoings.
Correct. Which, of course, to be fair, they actually have no idea fucking what happened here.
Well, sure, this time, but like,
so Dr. Kieran wakes up and Jonas reassures him that everything will be okay. But then we cut to a scene where Janet is showing Dr. Hammond Dr. Kieran's brain scan, and it turns out that he has advanced schizophrenia, and it's caused by the Nequadria exposure, and that he is suffering from delusions, paranoia, and possibly hallucinations.
I thought for sure she was going to say dementia, and it was just late stage because he was being paranoid of everything.
Yeah. I mean, late stage, like highly overtly developed schizophrenia that doesn't develop until your late 50s is probably not much better.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Definitely not.
And then back in the infirmary, he's continuing to talk to Jonas, but we see a really cool shift of the camera to show that Jonas is actually not there, and Dr. Kieran's not even actually awake yet.
Yeah.
That's cool. Real Jonas goes to talk to First Minister Vallis. Like, we need to have a conversation. And so then the rest of SGC finds the Resistance quote unquote safe house, but it turns out it's just an abandoned warehouse with absolutely nothing touched in it, but a random crate full of Nequadria.
Yeah. Which is kind of sad. I mean, it's good for them, but it's kind of sad. Like,
yeah,
you start to really see everything unfold.
That's yeah. I mean, and like at least the like smuggling the Nequadria he actually did do, so they are still helped out by it. But like, so Jack arrives at the negotiation room and tells Jonas what's really been going on and what's wrong with Dr. Kieran. And Jonas asks Vallis about the other two scientists who disappeared. And he and Commander Hale like confirm that they are both also deranged. Like, this is happening. Like, and that things are not going very well. And we find out that and so like Jonas basically is like, fuck you, and leaves. It goes back to Earth.
That's another thing that they're not telling people about.
Correct. We found out that Janet can like help medicate Kieran and like basically curtail any further damage, but they can't reverse it. He is still going to have this brain damage. But luckily, Jonas wasn't exposed enough because he left before they fully completed the bombs. And so he is fine. And the safeguards that they have on Earth for radiation protection and things like that are strong enough that they can actually still study the Nequadria and be safe because A, they're not going to create an atomic bomb with it, and B, they are developed past the 1940s. And they reached out to the Colonians to offer help upgrading their facilities, and like not even as a trade, just as a, hey, we'll help you upgrade your facilities so you can do your research safely. And they never responded. And then the real Jonas goes to talk to Kieran and like let him know that they're going to take him somewhere where they can help him. And he is still hallucinating and thinks that the Resistance is still fighting and that he's going to be in charge of Kelowna soon. And it is heartbreaking.
I teared up. It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Jonas told him he saved the world.
I know. That was so beautiful. He's like, but you saved the world. I was like, yeah. So it was plot wise not the most like exciting episode, but it did kind of continue the Jonas story arc, and it also like put a face to the bad guys kind of, so that like we know who in Kelowna is the issue, really, like why.
But also, even though like the plotline wasn't super exciting, it was really well written. Like, yes. I did not know that he had schizophrenia until they told us.
Right.
Like, and it didn't feel out of pocket either, because sometimes they do reveals like that and it's like, that's not, how did you get there?
Any sense. But then you look back at everything that he said and everything that he did and what the radiation would cause in your brain and everything, and you're like, that shit.
It lined up really well. So like, while it was a little low on the plot line, it was really well done with what they did. So I did really appreciate that.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah.
Okay.
And so I just think the hardest part is that, like, yes, we now have more Nequadria and we can do more research and blah, blah, blah. And yes, we have more confirmation that Jonas really can't go home in any significant way yet. But I think that, like, it's hard anytime they diverge from the main big bad kind of plots. It's always hard to see how it fits in until later when they find a way to drag it in.
Because this feels like a one-off. I'm sure it's not, but because it does have to do with Jonas's backstory. And I know we go back to Till's backstory, so I assume we will also go back to Jonas's backstory and whatnot. But like, yeah. Even though it doesn't feel as disconnected as some others. And I think it's because we've had such a focus on Jonas in these first 7 episodes. So like it didn't feel super out of context, but it doesn't, you can't tell where it fits in still. Like,
yeah. Well, and it's also hard because Stargate has a tendency to like fuck around with you a little bit. Where it's like in this season, we've had Redemptions Part 1 and 2. Okay. Absolutely, like, made sense. Closing up the Daniel storyline, closing up the Anubis stuff, confirming Jonas on the team, whatever. Then we had Descent, which like brought us back to the Thor information. It showed us that Anubis doesn't have his mothership anymore. Like it showed us where we are with the Togra stuff.
Right.
We had Frozen, which opened a new big plot line that we then have not been able to address yet. Then we had Nightwalkers, which did nothing. Then we had Abyss, which brought Baal in as the new quote-unquote big bad under Anubis for the season, which is great. But now we have 3 major storylines that we still have to deal with. And now we have an episode about Jonas, which is great.
Right.
But doesn't fit into any of those 3 major storylines.
It's a lot up front, especially they didn't know they were renewed after this season yet, right?
Correct.
So like they're opening up a lot of plot lines that they can't be certain they're going to close.
Yeah.
So that is a really good point that I didn't think about.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, there's 22 episodes, so we're like halfway through the first half of the season. So there's plenty of time.
Yeah, but that's a lot to have in one season too, though. Like even if you know.
Yeah.
So. Especially because we have stuff left over from other seasons too.
Yeah. So the next episode is also not connected to anything I just talked about.
Great season. Can't wait.
So it'll be interesting. It'll be fine. Thanks, but
the confidence.
Who do you want to punch?
Valis.
Fair.
I don't know that he's gonna be like bad guy or if he's just like not a great guy.
Right.
But I just don't like him.
Totally fair. That is probably the best answer. I'm gonna go with that chick who works for the thing because she did the most of the talking and she was monotone as shit and like pretended to just be diplomatic when she was just being an asshole. So
Fair.
So that's mine. Who is your MVP?
Jonas.
Obviously.
Specifically for telling Dr. Karen that he saved the world.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to go with Dr. Kieran because on the one hand he fucked everything up.
Sure.
But it wasn't his fault. And the fact that the government knew something was wrong with him and then continued to like just let him live in delusions instead of taking care of him because they were afraid of their experiments like going to waste. That's some bullshit.
Yeah. Yep.
And even in his
That's
like
really
schizophrenic paranoia, he knew that what the government was doing was wrong.
Right.
So
yeah. His heart was in the right spot. His brain was broken.
Correct.
Like our friend Will.
Well, and on that note, in the next episode of Death and Aliens, please join us while we deep dive into the first season of Hannibal. And I don't know if either of us are really prepared for what the fuck just happened to us over the last 2 months, 3 months, whatever. It's been insane. Yeah. So if you have questions, concerns, comments, please feel free to follow us on all of the social media at Death and Aliens and email us at deathandaliens@gmail.com. You can follow me everywhere at EMKAY_superstar.
And you can find me at CECloud13.
And with that, we will see you later. Bye.
Bye.